All right, let's get right into it. For decades, we've all thought that the world's most advanced factories, the ones building the chips that power literally everything, were the ultimate source of power and tech. But what if I told you there's a hidden switch, one that's controlled by a silent emperor who could turn that entire empire to dust in a heartbeat?
So imagine this, you're the king of technology. You're on top of the world. But what if someone you barely even think about could flip a switch and just poof, your entire empire goes dark? This is the strategic blind spot we're digging into today, and it forces us to ask, who really controls the global chip industry? The answer is probably not who you think.
For years, the story of tech has been pretty simple, right? It's all about a few massive titans. We're talking about Taiwan's TSMC, and of course, South Korea's Samsung and SK Hynix. These are the household names, the public faces of our digital age, the geopolitical players that everybody watches.
And look, their power is no joke. South Korea is an absolute juggernaut when it comes to memory chips. Samsung and SK Hynix together, they command over 73% of the entire global DRAM market. These chips are the very bedrock of our digital economy.
And then you've got Taiwan. They've built this incredible geopolitical defense strategy they call the Silicon Shield. The idea is simple. By making a staggering 90% of the world's most advanced chips, the rest of the world basically can't function without them. It's a powerful story, but in 2019, that story cracked.
Yeah, in the summer of 2019, this quiet political spat between Tokyo and Seoul suddenly sent a massive shockwave ripping through the entire tech world, and it exposed a hidden dependency, a foundational chokehold that, until that moment, was pretty much invisible to everyone.
The whole thing escalated with just shocking speed. It started with a South Korean court ruling on some old forced labor cases. Tokyo said this broke a 1965 treaty, and their response was brutally strategic. On July 1, 2019, Japan slammed the brakes on exports of critical chemicals to South Korea.
And Japan's attack was like a surgical strike. They didn't target phones or TVs. No, they went after three seemingly obscure chemicals that are absolutely essential for making all those cutting-edge screens and semiconductors.
For the executives at Samsung and SK Hynix, this wasn't just some bureaucratic headache. It was a declaration of war. Why? Because their multi-hundred-billion-dollar empires were, and they suddenly realized this, almost completely dependent on Japan for these exact materials.
To really get why they were panicking, you just have to look at the numbers. They tell a story of just how incredibly vulnerable South Korea really was.
I mean, this chokehold was nearly absolute. South Korea was importing 94% of its fluorinated polyamides and 92% of its photoresists from Japan. And for that ultra-pure hydrogen fluoride, it was basically 100%. Japan had just weaponized the very foundation of the supply chain.
The effect was immediate. It was devastating. Japanese exports of that critical hydrogen fluoride to South Korea plummeted by nearly 88%, almost overnight. Absolute panic erupted in Seoul. And suddenly, companies like Apple and Google were making frantic calls, terrified that the global supply of memory chips was about to just dry up.
So you have to wonder, right? Why couldn't a tech giant like Samsung just make this stuff themselves? Well, the answer lies in this world of near-impossible physics and chemistry. It's a realm that feels less like industrial manufacturing and, honestly, more like some kind of technological black magic.
It all starts with the canvas itself, the silicon wafer. Every single microchip you've ever used is built on one of these shimmering disks. And get this, just two Japanese companies, Shin-Etsu and Sumco, control over 60% of the entire global market for them.
Making one of these things is basically an art form. You have to grow this massive, atomically perfect crystal from molten silicon. But the real trick is hitting what's called 11 nines purity. That means for every trillion atoms, there's only one that isn't silicon. This isn't just a process you can write down. It's decades of know-how that other people have literally failed to replicate.
And then for photoresists, that's the magic paint used to print the circuits, there's this fundamental physics problem called the RLS triangle. You have to balance three things: resolution, line edge roughness, and sensitivity. But here's the catch. Improving one usually makes the others worse. Japanese firms have somehow mastered this impossible balancing act through 40 years of trial and error. That's a lead you just can't buy.
So you can see how that 2019 shock just permanently changed the game for everyone.
The risk was suddenly real. So now, let's look at how the key players are trying to navigate this new great game.
TSMC's strategy is completely fascinating. Instead of trying to break free from Japan, they're doing the exact opposite. They're building massive new factories in Japan to get closer to their masters. It's this wild move that secures their materials, but also deepens the very dependency they're trying to manage. Some people are calling it an act of strategic vassalization.
South Korea, on the other hand, launched this massive national effort to break the chains, and the results have been mixed. I mean, they had a stunning success. They figured out how to mass-produce that high-purity hydrogen fluoride in just a few months, an incredible achievement. But the black magic of those advanced photoresists, that remains a huge challenge.
Okay, so this brings us to the final analysis. Japan's chemical empire is incredibly powerful, yes, but it is not invincible. Its throne is actually a lot more fragile than it looks.
And here it is, the core insight of this whole thing. For years, we've all focused on the chip factories in Taiwan as the ultimate choke point. But what the 2019 crisis showed us is that the deeper truth, the real power, lies further upstream, in the foundational chemical plants of Japan.
But this emperor has weaknesses. Its deep geographic concentration in a place known for earthquakes makes it incredibly vulnerable. It's facing a massive demographic crisis with a shortage of engineers, and it's totally dependent on other countries for its own raw materials and energy.
And of course, lurking behind all of this is the immense shadow of China. Beijing is pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into its own industry. Now, they lag far behind today, but a future where China masters these foundational technologies, that would completely shatter the current global balance of power. Which really leaves us with this one powerful takeaway. At the end of the day, control over the digital age isn't just about assembling the shiny final product. The foundational power, the real leverage, lies with those who master the raw, indispensable elements.
This silent war for these materials, it has already begun. The real battlegrounds aren't just in the Taiwan Strait, they're in quiet laboratories and industrial parks all across Asia. So the big question for the future is this: who will ultimately master the elements of our digital age?